LMPs at the front of the grid, being driven by a selection of heroes, and 2 of them were in the gravel at Redgate after the first 300 metres. And that's just a shame when you're about to watch an endurance race. Here, lined up in the pit lane, all very professional, are the BBM run BR cars. As I say, essentially, if you think it looks like an Orica LMP2 car, you wouldn't be far wrong. But funded by the Russian team that has been a big feature of international motorsport. That seems to work. Anyway, Bob Berridge has acquired all those cars. He's the man who's also got most of the Peugeots that escaped from the factory museum.
Wow.
And those cars, I mean, one of the cars being driven here today by Richard Mines, a very, very experienced historic racer, and still an LMP3 racer for fun and so on, has now bought himself one of those Peugeots, and he's running out here in order to see if he can get a handle on exactly the Masters Endurance Legends series.
As well, because
and
around that time,
well,
to Europe,
it was up against things like the last of the Open Ferraris.
Yeah, indeed. Right,
So,
green flag wave. There's the Trans Am Ford Mustang of Ollie Bryant, which has been a Goodwood visitor for a good few seasons. The BR's doing fantastic. Max Lynn, one of Sean Lynn's 2 sons, he's going to be on pole position. We've got 1 or 2 that have withdrawn. Just quickly to mention, sadly, we're not going to see the James Cottingham, Matt Girardot, Dallara SP1. Sadly, the Orica car that has been withdrawn after dramas this morning. Also, Simon Watt Lola B2K40, another ALMS car and a 2001 Le Mans machine, that's missing from the grid. And there's a 3rd one as well. I think I'm right in saying there's another one that's gone. Andrew Lawley's Porsche, I'm afraid, has also withdrawn, but there's still enough, I think, to give us a good race here.
Yes, indeed. Do you know, I've got a horrid feeling that Simon earlier, I didn't realise it had had a mechanical problem. That's a shame. As you say, SMP Racing was what I was trying to remember being the name of the Russian racing organisation, and there are still that sticker you will see SMP Racing on, and 2 hours. Yes.
And he had a think about what he wanted to do and has come back all guns blazing into historic racing and has been very, very successful. Good guy, Steve Tandy.
He also had a year in British GT with Ginetta, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think Steve in the construction industry, and he and his brother were one of the first people into the former Eastern Europe after the wall came down. A really enthusiastic guy, immensely proud of the fact that his international achievements got him BRDC membership, and really, really enjoys his racing, and makes sure the cars are always very nicely turned out. So he's on the 2nd row in amongst all the BR1s with a lot, I think he wouldn't mind us saying, with some younger drivers around him. Is that right?
I think that's a fair point. Countdown continuing, klaxon sounds in the background. Drivers are strapped in and ready to go. This is, to make the point, another pit stop race. Pit window here is 15 to 25 minutes. And again, it is 90 seconds at rest. It's 105.3 seconds line to line. So everybody has to serve a stop. And the grid is good to go. There's been a Lynn lead, or can Jack Dex get away as the cars accelerate away now? Well, Maxwell Lynn was slightly in advance, wasn't he, as they came up towards the line, but the grunt and go Riley and Scott. Ollie Hancock there goes up the inside line to go 2nd, and the Open Top Sports racer is on a bit of a mission here as they head onto the top of the Craner Curves 40-minute race, and Ollie Hancock takes the lead.
No messing around. That is quite something. That is a much older car than the 2 BRs, and Ollie really showing everyone which way to go at the moment. Mike Newton up there nicely as well. Richard Mines the last of the BR cars, and then I'll be right, David. That looks as though, with that wheel's not turning, and he didn't hit the barrier hard. I think probably something did indeed lock up, don't you? I'm sure we'll learn about that in due course, but that's a shame. And position, having been rightly penalised.
Racing again, and the leader is in. So Mike Newton takes over the race lead. Maxwell Lynn comes down the pit lane, and he's not the only one. Steve Tandy is in as well. So good idea that perhaps from Maxwell Lynn to get that out of the way, get the laps of the race in a row now.
He's really going very quickly indeed. That's a 101.4, and that is Formula 1 pace from earlier on this afternoon. And the development, of course, between a 1982 Grand Prix car and a 2015 LMP2 car is substantial.
So they're in the background of the shot, the race lead battle. There is Steve Tandy coming down towards the chicane, and he is just about being able to keep both Maxwell Lynn and Jack Dex at bay for the moment. 45 is Jack Dex. Now, in terms of lap time, he's the quicker of the three as they come through. And actually, look what's ahead of them. The Riley and Scott goes by. Now, that would suggest that that was a really bad stop from Hancock and Cook, because somewhere along the line, if you think that they caught up under the safety car, they're virtually a lap down. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how that happened. The Porsche now has really got to keep out of the way, but I think that he's finding that more than enough car for him. They do, and R3 safely past the lapped Porsche, and it is indeed Tandy just from Max Lynn.
Richard Cook lost about a minute on the pit stop compared to everybody else. Pit stop time a minute longer, so
it must have been difficult to get the car started again.
Yeah.
I think Dex will not be popular if he takes out the customer, but he has managed to he's squeezed past Alex Lynn.
So 36 is Max Lynn coming through the chicane. Courage almost getting in the way, but now the BRs try to go side by side and also attack Tandy as they head down towards Redgate. Steve Tandy doing a good job here.
Interesting that Courage, the much older car, almost as quick in a straight line, but the LMP2 car's just on handling down now through this section, down through Donington's famous Craner curves, the great sweeps, which, as we were hearing earlier, are flat in a 1982 Grand Prix car, and they're pretty good, which anyone who's ever driven them will know that that's impressive. And these very neat car, the Lola in front of the two BRs, let's call them Oracles without upsetting anybody, the Lola of Tandy going very nicely indeed, and that car had some considerable success in American sports car racing in that right period.
So Tandy is still under pressure. We've got, as you can see on the clock, 12 minutes and change still to go. Down towards the chicane they come once more into Roberts, then they turn right, they turn left, now power up towards the line.
Yes, just checking there, the Tandy car is 3 years older than the BR cars that are chasing it now. It's a 2012 car, and the other's 2015. But they provide great racing, don't they? And these cars only ever seen in England once before, the BR cars, which is when they were current and racing in the WEC.
Just been reminded by Daily Sports Cars that there was a regulation last year that if you have a pro driver, you have a longer pit stop, and I think maybe that is what's happened to Ollie Hancock.
There you
because
are.
he's of a given driver grading. Yes, an elite driver penalty. That's the answer. So Masters. So that's what it's called. The elite driver penalty. Yes. Thank you, Graham. Well remembered. So yes, one or two teams copped it last year. Phil Quaife, I think, was a driver that got stung with it here last year. So it's meant to balance what you gain by your driver's speed, you lose out on the pit stop. But of course, Richard Cook now is really fighting a rear guard action. He's about to go a lap down.
Yes, and that does seem fair enough. I mean, in the BR cars, for instance, Richard Mines, proper amateur, and Ollie Hancock, very much. I mean, I presume he could be a silver without any trouble under the current FIA grading system.
So down through the Craners then, so that's why the minute was lost. It's the elite driver penalty, and Richard Cook is about to go a lap down. So the car that led early on looks like it's leading again, but it's almost getting in the way. Steve Tandy wants that to dart out of the way and he can get past. So up towards McLean's they come, and Richard Cook is not letting them go easily, is he? He's making a race of this.
Fair enough.
So he is the last unlapped driver, but not for much longer. And the last thing Steve Tandy needs, with two drivers breathing down his neck going for the lead, is a pesky back marker with a car that's got good straight line speed. Now Steve lines up to go to the inside line, and he's got the job done. But Jack Dex will try to follow him by, and does so. And Maxwell Lynn gets through as well. So Steve Tandy here is still under massive attack. 10 minutes to go.
Actually, that was very well done by Richard Cook, wasn't it, in the Riley and Scott car? Despite the enormous power of the Elan 6-litre engine in a straight line, they had to squeeze past him under braking through there, and he did let them go because, do you know, I think Max Lynn arguably was lucky to be allowed through. The other two had made their way.
Yeah, I agree with exactly that, but he's staying with them. So Maxwell Lynn, that led early on in the race, here's the new order, as you can see. So it's Tandy from Dex from Lynn, Steve Tandy getting ahead on the pit stops, and the squad turning him round in good time, getting him out there. So Steve Tandy leads, but he's got to hang on to this for another 9 minutes, and that's not easy.
And I think he would say probably not at mine age either, because the two young lads behind him are very young and fit indeed. Mike Newton is still hanging on to 5th with the MG Lola, which is good to see, in front of Richard Mines in the 3rd of these BR cars. And then in 7th place is where Richard Cook now is in the Riley and Scott. And then we have Finesse in the Courage and the GT class.
To the top of the Craners, under 9 minutes to go now. But Steve Tandy has stretched the margin ever so slightly coming out of Redgate Corner. It was only 4/10 over the timing line. Credit to Jack Dex, fastest lap of the race. Now, OK, he knows the car, but he's not done a huge amount of racing. He did race it here last year, I'll grant you. He has got some data. There is Mike Newton, who is now 22 seconds adrift. He's a lap up on that Courage, so he's not in jeopardy for that place. But again, Mike's car, its last lap was, what, a 64. He's not going quite as quickly as the start of the race, but not massively off the earlier pace, but still heading for a class win in 5th overall. And the Courage of Mike Furness is 2nd in class, albeit a lap adrift of the MG Lola.
I really like the red Courage here, and that also was, in its time at Le Mans, was a Russian-sponsored car, wasn't it? They're built a lot of those cars, and were running very similar looking cars in LMP1 as in LMP2, engine dependent in period. That car of Furness was actually built to be running in the yes, that's the middle noughties, so 2006, 2007, 2008 sort of period, when they were really having their Courages were having their heyday. A period, of course, at the front end of the Le Mans field, very much dominated by the Audis. And this series has had Audis out in it, and there are people also, I know, trying to persuade the factory to let go of some of the wonderful Audis of the late period. Sean Lynn, of course, is the owner of one of the Bentleys from 2003, and he will bring that out occasionally. But as he says, and certainly as Bentley feel, it's very much a demonstration car rather than one they want to see being raced very hard. Sean Lynn, who we're talking about, and is in 4th place at the moment, also has a proper Ferrari 512M and a proper Gulf Porsche 917. And that car was beautifully restored for him by Lanzante, as it's the back markers that's going to give Tandy the difficulty, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because the young boys are all over him when he is being a little bit more cautious in who he's going to overtake.
Those GT cars are battling for the GT class lead anyway, so they're busy with their own race. Now, the leading trio gets through without too much drama that time. But yeah, Steve Tandy is the pioneer. He's the first one to come up on the traffic. He's got to work out when and where to dart past. And the two BRs, eager to try and find a way through as well. So Steve Tandy has got to do the hard yards on two fronts, get through the traffic, and also not be too cautious, not leave the slightest opportunity there for Jack Dex or for Maxwell Lynn, the early stint leader, to find a way through. 6 minutes are on the clock, and they're lapping at just over a minute. Now, Sean Lynn, 4th, has done the fastest lap of the race. He is, at the moment, 2.4 seconds off the back of his son, Max. There they are going out of Redgate. Can Sean Lynn get there in time? His last lap then was a 61.2, and he is closing. So, yeah, the gap is coming down a little bit. He's chipping away. Sean Lynn might get up there before the very end of the race as he goes out of the old hairpin. He's in 4th. You can see the gap coming down and down. So as if Steve Tandy didn't have enough problems, a 3rd car to sit on his tail for the last couple of laps could be on the cards here.
Yes, you can just imagine the radio conversation going on with Maxwell Lynn lying in 3rd place there. He said, "Your dad's gone purple."
Yes, right.
Well, he may well have done with the effort, but 101.226 is a very quick, and I thought he was going to try and go for it there.
That was Dex on Tandy.
Yes, Dex was looking really as though he was right there on Steve Tandy at that point. And they are trying to spook each other, there's no doubt about it. Tandy's Lola does look at the moment as though he has the legs on acceleration from Roberts. The coming out of the chicane and down the pit straight, and that may yet be enough. But as you say, he's going to have to do another 4, probably 5 laps, isn't he?
And I think Sean Lynn has got held up in traffic on that last lap because it was a slower lap at 62.584. So he lost out. He was slower than the 3 he's chasing. But look, Tandy has got another back marker up the road, I suspect. Yes, he has. So through they come. And as they accelerate up the hill now, is he going to be able to find a way through?
And well, it's the teammate, it's Richard Mines.
It is.
The amateur in 6th position.
And Dex attacks for the race lead, so Tandy's got BRs all around him. There's one closing, there are 2 on his tail, there's 1 to lap, and he's going to get past Richard Mines on the inside. And actually, Richard cuts across the front of Jack Dex, and suddenly Steve Tandy gets a get out of jail free card. Push, 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 Steve, while Jack Dex only briefly, but he's put off his stride.
I think the radio might have mentioned to Richard Mines, would you mind moving over, or words to that effect,
yes.
As our 2 young boys come past. So don't be confused, it looks like there are 3 of the BRs lining line astern, but 2 are in the front group. I tell you what, that means that Sean Lynn's closed up a bit with all that.
Indeed.
And he's now got to get past Richard Mines as well as they sweep down the Craners and into the old hairpin.
Yeah, his last lap, Sean's, was quicker than anybody ahead of him because, of course, they had the traffic to worry about. But look, Steve Tandy was 9/10 to the good when they came over the timing line. If he can carry on at that pace and keep that advantage, that will do him. But you get the feeling that Jack Dex is going to mount another challenge. Clock ticking on down, but Steve Tandy, fair play, is doing a really impressive job here.
He certainly is. And I think he's just got that bit of a breathing space. No, don't you now? It may just be that he can hang on there. Here comes Dad charging up the inside of Richard Mines. That's Sean Lynn then into maintaining his solid 4th place. And another quick lap from him. He is at the moment the fastest lap man at 101.266. That's very impressive.
It is indeed, against, dare one say, younger hot shoes. Right, Steve Tandy's advantage was 9/10 and it's come down to 4/10. So Jack Dex is pushing. There will be time for at least 2 more laps at the end of this. So Steve Tandy, you can see the gap evaporating as Jack Dex hustles on. He's lining up, isn't he, to have another go before the very end. Steve Tandy doing a good job of hanging on for the moment. Turns right out of McLean's, heads up the hill towards Coppice. Dex looks to the inside line, can't really do it there, but he closes under braking. Now, does the move come at the chicane? If so, needs to start here.
He's got to work it now. And he's tucked in right underneath his rear wing, and he's pulling out to have a look. But Tandy's wily to that. Just a gentle move, nothing extravagant, and this is where Tandy just seems to pull out a few yards. Yep, done it again.
So 2 laps to go, time for 2 more as they come now down through the right-hander of Redgate corner. So Steve Tandy hustles on. Jack Dex was 0.438 of a second behind. 90 seconds to go. If anything, Maxwell Lynn looks like he's dropped a length or 2. Down through the Craners, the leading Lola has the advantage. Under braking, Jack Dex in the BR in 2nd place closes the gap. There's another back marker up the road. Is it Mike Furness in the Courage? Yes, it is, who is running 8th overall. Steve Tandy will be upon him in a moment or 2. Ideally, he wants to get past on Starkey Straight down towards Roberts, but look how close it is for the race lead. 1 more lap to run at the end of this, and Jack Dex is getting ever more toey. If he wasn't committed before, he certainly is now. Tandy has to go defensive, and he's got to get through the traffic, down to the chicane, ready to start the last lap.
Very nice, and well done Furness there in the Courage, keeping out of the way of the battling 3 at the front. Steve Tandy's Lola was originally a Mazda factory car. They ran with the Mazda engines, of course, and beautifully developed by Pete Chambers Engineering. And Steve Tandy has run in this series since Ron Maiden first decided that's what he wanted to have. But this is now getting really close. Just 30 seconds left, and this will see them down through the Craners into the old hairpin.
Through the right-hander, onto the power, climb the hill up towards McLean's, and Jack Dex again at this point throwing everything at Steve Tandy, but Steve's soaking up the pressure. Well, we thought that was the case in the context of Steve Hartley in historic Formula 1 earlier, and he made a tiny late race error. Jack Dex has dropped back a little bit out of McLean's, hasn't he? Yes, by 2-3 lengths, and suddenly Maxwell Lynn is all over him like a cheap suit.
And they're coming down now for what is now, it is now no time on the clock. That is the time of the race up, so this will be it as they come across the line now, and it looks like Tandy.
Steve Tandy then up towards the checkered flag. Brilliant drive that by Steve to fend off the young pups. Checkered flag flies. Steve Tandy wins the second Endurance Legends race of the weekend at this Masters historic race of the weekend at Donington Park. Second goes to Jack Dex from Maxwell Lynn. Sean Lynn, flashing the lights, takes fourth and the fastest lap of the race. Well done, Sean. Mike Newton is going to be fifth and a class winner. And Richard